These two graphs reveal a very uncomfortable truth about illegal immigration in America. Jake Bro, a journalist on YouTube, revealed how the amount of migrant encounters at the US-Mexico border almost directly correlates with the unemployment rate. Essentially, every time there's a recession and jobs are scarce, illegal migration goes down. When the economy is booming and jobs need filling, the illegal migration rate goes up. As we can see, there was a huge boom of immigration under the Reagan regime during the 1980s. It plummeted in the 90s with a recession, and it peaked again in 2008 and then plummeted after the recession. And right now the economy is booming, and thus immigration is also booming. Now, being someone who sees many of these macro world issues through a realpolitik lens, I'm naturally inclined to believe that economic factors trump ideological policy. But to make sure I'm not being blinded by confirmation bias, I've done more digging. Here's some data from the Cato Institute. The x-axis refers to the number of non-farm job openings in America, and the y-axis refers to the number of encounters on the US-Mexico border. Grey dots refer to Obama and brown to Trump. As we can see, there were significantly more encounters during the Trump administration than Obama's, and that's despite Trump's anti-immigration rhetoric. And that's because Obama reigned during the post-2008 recession era, when the economy was weaker. When the jobs came back under the economically stronger era of the Trump administration, the amount of migrants increased. This non-partisan trend continued during the Biden era. The American economy continued to boom, and now there's twice the amount of non-farm job openings under Biden compared to Trump, and as a result there's about twice the number of illegal migrant encounters at the border. Jasmine Singh, an immigration attorney writing for Mexico Business News, confirms this is what's happening. Contrary to popular belief, shortly after the US enters a recession, there is net zero immigration in the US from the US-Mexican border. The reason for net zero immigration is simple. If there is no employment awaiting these immigrants in the US, there is no motive for these immigrants to make the dangerous border crossing. In other words, illegal immigration occurs only when US employers have employment to offer immigrant workers. What's even more interesting is immigration enforcement. Despite Trump's rhetoric, the number of arrests and deportations of illegal immigrants were far less than under Obama's regime, which further demonstrates that enforcement is one of the levers governments can pull to control unemployment and the economy. When times are tough and jobs are limited, you deport illegal immigrants so citizens have jobs. When the economy is booming and there aren't enough people to fill the jobs, you allow more immigrants to stay to fuel the booming economy. Going back to Jake Bro, he also brings up the interesting point about where these unauthorized immigrants are working. More than half are hired farmers. That's 11 million people. Without them, the farming industry, particularly in the South, would collapse. American small businesses are also a huge employer of these people, and thus deporting these people would be something these small businesses and farms would not support. This also suggests that the best way to curb illegal immigration is simply to arrest the employers, which naturally would be very unpopular with voters. Okay, now I've said all this, you might simply ask, why can't Western countries be like Japan or South Korea? These are rich, developed countries with zero immigration. Well, simply because economically speaking, they are about to encounter an existential population crisis. With birth rates so low in pretty much all developed countries, with an aging population, there soon won't be enough working-age people to support the elderly. And I think it's also important to note that almost every single great economic boom in history, from China in the 2000s, Japan in the 70s and 80s, Germany in the early 20th century, they were booming because of a huge supply of young working-aged people. If the US doesn't want their economy to stagnate and contract like what's happening in Japan, Korea and China, at the very least it needs to maintain the current population size. But population projections from the US Census Bureau show that this will not be possible without a lot of immigration. In conclusion, yes, there's obviously downsides to immigration: the loss and dilution of the culture, competition for low-skilled jobs, crime, and it's also very easy to take sides in American politics depending on immigration rhetoric from either side, but by looking at the current and historical data, immigration in America is overwhelmingly determined by the law of supply and demand. I'll end by quoting the Cato Institute: "Policy matters, but the economy matters more." Thanks for listening.